Hi everyone, and welcome to the presentation on how and guide of how we're gonna connect to your services in our cluster of the semester project. So what are service? I asked on Reddit to find some help and explain to me what services are in Kubernetes, and apparently they're just IP tables with extra steps and names. You know you can always trust it if a guy on Reddit tells you, and especially if that's me. So you have new pods, and they have IPs. You want to connect to those pods, but there is a scheduler that keeps on killing and redeploying the pods, which means you're gonna always have to switch up your IPs to match the living pods in our cluster right now. That's where a service come in handy. You don't have to switch your IP all the time. You can just connect to a service that then finds all of the pods that have a selector or a label on them that it's going to use to expose them for you. It's also connected to a DNS server and stored in it with a name, so your pods can just go look up to your DNS service. Oh, we have a service over here for you that match your IP that you want to go to, or your host name. So, how do they look like? Inside of the service, you have a configuration. Just like all Kubernetes configurations, you have API, kind, metadata, and spec. And under metadata, you have your name. That's the name you're going to use when you have to connect to your service. Then you have your specs. Within your specs, you have a selector and a target port. Those are quite important. Your selector has to match a label that is given in a deployment. That's what it uses to find your pods and expose them. Expose them on the target port. Your target port has to match the container port. As you can see over here, it's an array, and so is the container ports. So you can actually expose several ports on a single container, just like you can in Docker. So you also have a node port and a port. They're not necessary. You'll be giving a node port automatically if you don't specify it. And also, you'll be giving a port automatically if you don't specify it. Your port is going to be the exact same as your target port, if not specified. So that's how you're going to configure them. But you probably won't that much look into this because services are meant to be almost persistent. They're stable components in a cluster. So let's look at this diagram. They work across several nodes, as you can see. We have two pods, which are both exposed by the same service on port 80. The port matches the target port here because it was not specified to be something else. Then we also have a node port. And you see the node port goes to a user and the port goes to some other port within the cluster. And that's mainly how we're gonna use those different ports, types of ports, but we're gonna get further into that later on. So let's test it out. I'm gonna run a busybox container. It's just a shell. Don't think of it as anything else, just a shell. And then we are gonna list all of the services that is in the namespace of Team 01. We have a development and a development service. The type is different, and that's quite important because the cluster IPs can only be accessed from within the cluster, whereas a load balancer, which is basically the same as a node port, can be exposed to people or services from outside of the cluster. Hence, a load balancer has two different ports, a port and a target or a node port. Port and a node port. So my shell is spun up in the same namespace as the services we're looking into. And also a little fun fact about the DNS server. You can actually see when we look up the service, this is the development service, and it's lookup development service. You can actually see that we are looking at the DNS server of our cluster called DNS. And sure enough, here we have the IP matching and everything, and a name. But this name is quite long, so let's try to dissect it and look at it. ignore the last part. You're gonna use this name a lot, so let's make it easy to remember. You don't have to specify the ending of it, like service cluster local. Only have one cluster right now, no external clusters, and we only use services, so don't need to specify that. So the basic template of how you're gonna find a service is you use its resource name, then dot its namespace, development service dot timo1. But let's try to make it a prediction to see if this actually holds up. We found the service in timo1. It's called development. So, and it's in the namespace of timo1. So let's try to find it with development.timo1. And we're able to do so. It is that easy. It just works. Okay, here's a quick tip. When you're in the same namespace, just forget about the namespace. It'll take your default namespace automatically, or look for it automatically if it's not specified. See it works. We can find development without namespace. Perfect. So let's try to find it. Let's try to curl from it. Right now we've seen if you could actually find the service, but now let's try to curl from one of the ports that they've exposed. We're gonna look at a deployment from the timo1, our web design group, and they have an HTML page that we can curl and get some HTML code from. As you can see over here, we have a port. That port is not 80 right now, it is 3070, and it matches the container port. And the selector matches the label. So let's try to access it from another pod. And indeed, that is possible. Curl, HTTP, don't even think you actually need that. But development service 3070. And it works. We get the HTML, we can find it. We can find the container of the pod using the service that it is exposed by. Let's try from another namespace. And remember, here we didn't append namespace on. Here we have to, because we're in another namespace. Right now we're in team 12, that is my namespace, or my group's namespace. And indeed it works again. Literally just works. Use the name of the service. And if it doesn't work, then come to us. We are very much happy to help. So how do we use the services in an application? Let's see here. You have to, just like curling, you have to make up a string that you're going to connect to, just like when you're connecting to a database. So HTTP is what we're going to access with. We're going to pull up the name, and then we have to find the port. Here the service is the service name, and the port but we're going to try to curl from is the port 3070. And it works just like it from the shell, because it is literally just a program in a pod, just like the shell we called from earlier was. Okay, so but what about the node ports? What are those used for? Yes, they're used from whenever you have to access a pod through a service from outside of the cluster. Here you can see we have the node port 3132.4. That was the node port of the service. If you just go back a little bit over here, you see node port 3132.4. There we go. And you just can pick any public node that we have. That is, let me do 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9. And later on, when your namespace gets an ingress, you don't even have to add the port afterwards. Then we have an ingress that abstracts that all away from you, because a customer shouldn't know specifically which pods to go to, or ports to go to. But yes, that's how you connect it. Connect your application to other applications through services, and how you're gonna use, and that is what you're gonna use in our cluster. If you encounter any issues, please contact us. We really enjoy helping you, because the more we troubleshoot things and try to fix things in our own cluster, the better we get to know how this system works, and the better we get to help you in the future. So please contact us if you encounter any issues. Right now we have 100% customer satisfaction, so we plan on maintaining that ratio. So please contact us if you have any issues, and we're looking forward to see a lot more deployments onto the cluster, since the deadline for our minimal viable product is right up in next week. See you, and thank you for watching the presentation.